Most people believe money responds to effort alone, hours worked, strategies applied, risks taken. Yet history, scripture, and experience quietly testify to a deeper architecture beneath the surface. There are moments in time that behave differently than others. Days that function not merely as dates on a calendar, but as gateways, thresholds where intention, decision, and direction converge. January 16 is one such moment. Not because the day itself is mystical, but because you are standing in it. You are early enough in the year for correction, yet far enough in the year for correction, yet far enough in to reveal your true priorities. The noise of resolutions has faded. What remains is pattern what you do when no one is applauding, when enthusiasm has cooled, when discipline alone must speak. Financial increase is never accidental. It is governed by laws as precise as those that keep the stars in their courses. Ignore them, and you drift. Align with them, and doors begin to open, sometimes quietly, sometimes suddenly. Today is not about superstition. It is about stewardship of time, attention, and obedience. What you choose today will echo forward, compounding either as clarity or as chaos. And whether you realize it or not, you are standing at a portal. Time is often treated as a backdrop, an empty container in which life simply happens. We schedule, rush, postpone, and assume tomorrow will compensate for today. But time is not neutral. It is structured, layered, and governed by laws that operate whether or not we acknowledge them. In Scripture, time is never portrayed as random. It is measured, appointed, and frequently described as something that can be redeemed or squandered. Certain moments carry weight, not because the clock says so, but because alignment or misalignment within those moments determines outcomes far beyond the hour itself. January 16 stands as a revealing point in the calendar. The year has already begun to answer back to you. The intentions you declared at the start of January are either being translated into discipline or quietly abandoned. This day exposes whether you are governed by impulse or by principle. And that is why time here matters. Not because it is magical, but because it is honest. It tells the truth about who is in control, your appetites or your convictions. Throughout history, pivotal shifts have occurred at seemingly ordinary moments. A single decision made early altered an entire trajectory later. This is because time amplifies direction. If your compass is off by only a few degrees at the beginning, the distance traveled will eventually place you far from your intended destination. Financial outcomes work the same way. They are not sudden arrivals, they are accumulations. What you tolerate early becomes what you struggle with later. What you correct early becomes what you struggle with later. What you correct early becomes what sustains you later. The danger is assuming that days are interchangeable. They are not. There are moments when awareness is heightened, when correction is still inexpensive, when obedience costs little compared to what it will demand later. January 16 is early enough to change course without humiliation, without loss, without crisis. That alone makes it valuable. Ignoring such moments does not pause the system, it merely allows momentum to continue unchecked. Time also functions as a witness. It records what you prioritize when motivation fades. Anyone can act wisely on January 1. Far fewer do so 2 weeks later. This is where integrity is measured not by declarations but by continuation. Financial stewardship is never proven in grand gestures. It is revealed in daily choices repeated without applause. Time tests whether your values are real or rhetorical. There is also a sobering truth. Time will eventually demand payment for what was neglected. Discipline either becomes a daily inconvenience or a future emergency. January 16 offers the former. Ignore it, and the latter grows quietly in the background. This is why Scripture urges urgency, not panic, but precision. Today is emphasized repeatedly because tomorrow hardens patterns. Delay is emphasized repeatedly because tomorrow hardens patterns. Delay does not preserve freedom. It gradually removes options. When time is understood properly, it becomes an ally rather than an enemy. You stop asking for sudden breakthroughs and start building sustainable systems. You recognize that financial peace is rarely the result of one miracle, but of many aligned decisions made consistently. Time multiplies whatever you place into it, wisdom or folly, discipline or denial. This day invites examination, not condemnation, not fear, but clarity. Where is your money responding to emotion rather than intention? Where are small leaks being ignored because they seem insignificant? Where has small procrastination disguised itself as patience? These questions matter because time will answer them for you if you do not answer them yourself. January 16 does not force anything open. It reveals what is already moving. It shows whether your life is aligned with the laws that govern increase or drifting against them. Time is not waiting to see what you will do. It is already recording it. And what you do now will quietly determine what becomes possible later. Nothing visible appears without first being patterned in the unseen. This is a law woven into creation itself. Buildings are drawn before they are constructed, words are formed in the mind before they are spoken, and outcomes are rehearsed in habit long before they are experienced in reality. Financial provision follows the same architecture. Money does not respond primarily to wishes or even to effort. It responds to patterns. And patterns, once established, have momentum that is difficult to interrupt. Most people focus on moments, paydays, bills, opportunities, crises, while ignoring the repetitive behaviors that quietly govern them. They pray for increase but rehearse disorder. They hope for relief while reinforcing the very cycles that keep them constrained. The danger is not lack of desire, it is lack of awareness. What you do repeatedly in private is far more influential than what you attempt occasionally in public. Patterns are powerful because they operate below the level of emotion. You do not feel a pattern every time it expresses itself. You simply act it out. This is why people are often surprised by their financial results. They experience the harvest without remembering the seed. Yet the seed was sown daily through unmanaged spending, delayed obedience, neglected planning, or the refusal to confront uncomfortable truths. Provision follows predictability. Not predictability in income, but predictability in stewardship. Resources are drawn towards systems that can handle them. This is why sudden increases often disappear just as suddenly. The pattern was not prepared for the provision. Money exposed what discipline had not yet built. Increase never fixes disorder, it magnifies it. The quiet power of January 16 lies in its exposure of pattern. The excitement of a new year has settled, leaving behind routine. What remains is the truth of your systems. Are you tracking what you spend or guessing? Are you directing money intentionally or reacting emotionally? Are you consistent in generosity or impulsive in it? These are not moral questions. They are structural ones, and structures determine capacity. Scripture repeatedly links prosperity to wisdom, not to intensity. Wisdom is simply the ability to apply knowledge consistently over time. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It builds slowly, almost invisibly, until one day its results appear undeniable. Folly works the same way, just in the opposite direction. Small compromises repeated faithfully become large constraints eventually. Patterns also reveal trust. Where you establish order, you demonstrate belief in tomorrow. Where you remain chaotic, you unconsciously assume tomorrow will rescue you from today. That assumption is costly. Time does not rescue disorder, it compounds it. This is why early correction is an act of faith. You change now because you believe later matters. There is a spiritual dimension to this that is often misunderstood. Obedience is not merely about rules. It is about alignment with reality. The laws that govern increase are not arbitrary commands. They are descriptions of how things actually work. When you align with them, you experience flow. When you resist them, you experience friction. The friction is not punishment. It is feedback. Financial patterns also expose identity. You will manage money in a way that matches how you see yourself. If you see yourself as temporary, you will spend temporarily. If you see yourself as entrusted, you will steward carefully. This is why transformation must occur at the level of thinking before it can manifest in accounts. A new income with an old mindset produces the same ending, just delayed. January 16 is not asking for perfection. It is asking for pattern recognition. What you repeat is what you are becoming, and what you are becoming is what your finances will eventually reflect. Change the pattern, and provision follows. Ignore it, and no amount of wishing will alter the outcome. Increase never begins with accumulation. It begins with alignment. This is one of the most misunderstood principles in matters of provision. Many assume that financial growth is unlocked by intensity, working harder, chasing more opportunities, demanding quicker results. But alignment operates on a different axis. It is not about doing more things. It is about bringing existing things into order. When thoughts, words, decisions, and actions point in the same direction, momentum is created. Without alignment, effort leaks energy and produces frustration rather than fruit. Misalignment is subtle because it often feels productive. A person can be busy, motivated and sincere, while still working against the very outcome they desire. They may speak faith while practicing fear, pray for abundance while managing resources carelessly, or pursue opportunity while resisting discipline. These internal contradictions create drag. Progress feels slow, not because resistance is external, but because it is internal. Alignment requires honesty before it requires action. You cannot reorder what you refuse to examine. This is why moments of reflection are so threatening. They expose gaps between intention and behavior. Financial stress is often less about lack of money and more about lack of congruence. Income may rise, but peace does not follow because the underlying system remains fractured. Words play a larger role here than many realize. Language reveals belief. How you speak about money when no one is listening discloses what you expect from it. If your words consistently frame finances as oppressive, scarce, or uncontrollable, your decisions will unconsciously reinforce that narrative. Alignment begins when speech agrees with stewardship, when confession matches conduct, not in denial, but in deliberate recalibration. Thoughts must also be addressed. Every financial choice passes first through an assumption. Some believe money is to be spent quickly before it disappears. Others assume it is too complex to manage wisely. Still others equate increase with danger or responsibility they would rather avoid. These assumptions operate silently, shaping behavior without permission. Alignment demands that these internal scripts be confronted and corrected. Actions, of course, are where alignment becomes visible. Small disciplines tracking expenses, honoring commitments, planning rather than reacting may seem insignificant, but they are signals. They communicate readiness. Systems respond to signals, not to wishes. Order attracts opportunity because it demonstrates capacity. Chaos repels it because it threatens waste. There is a spiritual consistency to this principle. Throughout Scripture, increase follows obedience, not ambition. Obedience is alignment in motion. It is choosing to act in agreement with truth, even when emotion resists. This is why alignment often feels uncomfortable at first. It requires letting go of familiar patterns, even if those patterns are destructive. Comfort is rarely aligned with growth. January 16 functions as a checkpoint for alignment. By this point in the year, intentions have either begun to reorganize behavior or they have been absorbed back into habit. This day does not condemn. It clarifies. It reveals whether your financial life is integrated or fragmented. Are your goals supported by your routines? Are your prayers echoed in your planning? Are your hopes reinforced by your habits? Alignment also precedes trust. Responsibility is extended to those who demonstrate consistency. This is not favoritism, it is functionality. You would not pour water into a cracked vessel and expect it to be preserved. In the same way, increase waits for coherence. It waits until the structure can sustain what it receives. The promise is not that alignment guarantees instant wealth. The promise is not alignment guarantees instant wealth. The promise is that alignment removes resistance. When resistance is gone, progress becomes inevitable. It may be slow at first, but it is steady. And steady progress outlasts sudden gains every time. Alignment is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. But once established, it changes everything. What once felt heavy begins to move. What once seemed blocked begins to open. And provision, no longer forced, begins to flow in its proper season. Beginnings carry a weight that endings do not. This is a principle embedded into creation, observed across nature, history, and spiritual law. The first movement sets the tone for everything that follows. The initial direction determines the eventual destination. This is why beginnings are guarded so carefully in Scripture, not out of ritual, but out of recognition. What you do first reveals what you value most. The concept of firstfruits is often misunderstood as merely a financial act, but it is far broader than that. It is a posture. It answers a fundamental question: who or what receives your trust before anything else competes for it? The first portion of time. Attention. Resources declares ownership and priority. What is honored first governs what remains. January 16 represents a second beginning. The first rush of the year has passed, and now intention is tested by reality. This is where firstfruits become practical rather than symbolic. It is no longer about what you said you would do. It is about what you actually did when enthusiasm diminished. The first decisions made in this quieter space carry unusual authority because they are made without adrenaline. When beginnings are mishandled, everything downstream feels strained. You spend the rest of the year correcting what could have been established early. Financial stress often traces back not to a single crisis, but to neglected starts, unplanned months, reactive spending, delayed generosity, postponed discipline. The beginning was rushed or ignored, and the consequences quietly accumulated. Firstfruits function as alignment at the front end. They prevent drift. By setting order early, you remove the need for constant correction later. This is not about legalism. It is about leverage. Early obedience multiplies impact because it shapes habit before habit hardens. What you establish now becomes automatic later. There is also a trust exchange embedded in firstfruits. You release something valuable before knowing how the rest will unfold. This runs counter to fear, which demands proof before obedience. Fear says, wait and see. Faith says, act and trust. The difference between the two determines not only spiritual outcomes, but financial ones. Waiting for certainty often guarantees stagnation. Acting in alignment creates movement. The firstfruits principle also exposes idols. Whatever resists being placed first has quietly claimed that position already. If order feels threatening, it is because disorder has been comfortable. If generosity feels risky, it is because control has been trusted more than provision. Beginnings reveal these conflicts because they force choice. Financially, firstfruits manifest as intentional planning before spending, giving before consuming, saving before indulging. These actions seem small, but they reorder the system. Money begins to follow purpose rather than impulse. Decisions become proactive instead of reactive. Stress decreases not because income increased, but because clarity did. January 16 is late enough to reveal excuses and early enough to dismantle them. You still have time to establish firstfruits without embarrassment or loss. This is mercy disguised as opportunity. Many wait until crisis forces discipline. Wisdom establishes it voluntarily. When firstfruits are honored, the remainder is protected. This does not mean trouble disappears, but it does mean chaos loses authority. You are no longer negotiating from desperation, but from intention. The year stops happening to you and begins responding to you. Beginnings do not demand perfection. They demand priority. Set the order, and the system will follow. Ignore it, and you will spend the rest of the year fighting momentum. What you place first today quietly decides what becomes possible tomorrow. What governs the visible world is rarely visible itself. Outcomes appear sudden, but they are almost always the result of systems already in motion. Finances, in particular, are often misread because people focus on transactions rather than the structure behind them. They watch money come and go without considering the unseen framework that determines why it behaves the way it does. Yet every consistent result, whether abundance or lack, is being produced by laws operating quietly beneath the surface. These laws are not mystical in the sense of being unpredictable. They are orderly, reliable, and impartial. They function whether they are acknowledged or ignored. Discipline, restraint, foresight, diligence, and wisdom are not moral decorations. They are governing principles. When they are present, resources stabilize and grow. When they are absent, resources scatter, no matter how much effort is applied. The invisible always precedes the visible. Before a financial breakthrough manifests, something unseen has already shifted. Thinking has changed. Habits have been reordered. Priorities have been clarified. People often celebrate the moment of arrival without recognizing the long process of alignment that made it inevitable. Conversely, when collapse occurs, it rarely begins with a crisis. It begins with small compromises that go unnoticed because they seem insignificant. Unseen systems also explain why two people with the same income experience radically different outcomes. One lives in constant pressure, the other in steady peace. The difference is not luck, intelligence, or opportunity. It is structure. One is aligned with governing laws, the other is violating them unknowingly. The laws respond accordingly, without commentary. January 16 draws attention to these hidden frameworks. It interrupts the illusion that money problems are purely external. It invites examination of what has been quietly governing decisions. Are there systems in place, or are reactions being mistaken for strategy? Are expenses assigned purpose, or are they driven by mood? Is there margin, or is every gain immediately consumed? These are not surface-level questions. They probe the invisible architecture. There is a reason Scripture emphasizes wisdom so heavily in matters of provision. Wisdom is simply alignment with reality. It is knowing how things work and cooperating with them rather than fighting them. This is why wisdom often appears slow. It does not chase outcomes. It builds foundations. It prefers sustainability over spectacle. Invisible systems also determine capacity. Opportunity does not ask whether you desire it. It asks whether you can handle it. Increased test structure. If the system is weak, the increase exposes it. If the system is sound, the increase strengthens it. This is why waiting can sometimes be protection. Delay is not always resistance. Sometimes it is mercy, allowing the unseen to be repaired before the visible is expanded. The unseen realm of decision-making is where authority is established. Who decides where money goes, impulse or intention? Who governs spending, emotion or order? Who sets limits, discipline or desire? These questions are answered daily, quietly, without ceremony, yet they determine everything. Financial freedom is not achieved by escaping laws, but by submitting to them. Once you stop resisting structure, life becomes lighter. Money no longer feels hostile because it is no longer unmanaged. Stress diminishes not because circumstances vanished, but because chaos lost control. January 16 does not create these systems, it reveals them. It shows whether the unseen is supporting or sabotaging the visible. Change must occur here first. Adjust the framework and the outcome follows naturally. Ignore it and no external solution will last. The greatest shifts rarely announce themselves. They happen when someone quietly decides to honor the laws that were always there. And once those laws are respected, the visible world has no choice but to respond. Opportunity is often mistaken for randomness. People speak of luck, timing, or chance as though doors simply open without cause. Yet opportunity is remarkably selective. It responds to readiness, not desire. It searches for capacity, not enthusiasm. When opportunity arrives and finds no structure, no discipline, no order, it does not stay. It moves on quietly, leaving behind confusion about what went wrong. Responsibility is the gatekeeper of increase. This is not a popular idea because it removes the comfort of blaming external forces, but it is a consistent one. Throughout Scripture and history, enlargement follows demonstrated faithfulness in small things. This is not symbolism, it is operational logic. What cannot be managed in small measure will be destroyed in large measure. Many people want financial breakthrough without financial accountability. They want overflow without oversight, blessing without burden. Yet every form of increase brings weight. It brings decisions, pressure, and consequence. Opportunity does not ask whether you want these things. It assumes you can carry them. If you cannot, it withholds itself for your protection. January 16 functions as a quiet interview, not with opportunity itself, but with the conditions that attract it. Are you consistent where no one is watching? Are commitments honored when they are inconvenient? Are systems maintained when emotions fluctuate? These questions are being answered daily, regardless of whether they are acknowledged. Responsibility begins with ownership, not ownership of outcomes alone, but of processes. It is easy to claim responsibility when results are favorable. It is harder to claim it when correction is required. Yet correction is often the very thing that proves readiness. A person who can adjust without defensiveness demonstrates maturity. A person who resists feedback disqualifies themselves from growth. Financial responsibility is expressed in restraint as much as in action. Knowing when not to spend is as important as knowing where to invest. Delayed gratification is not deprivation. It is evidence of vision. It declares that future stability is valued more than present pleasure. Opportunity is drawn to this mindset because it recognizes longevity. Responsibility also requires clarity. Vague goals produce vague outcomes. If money has no assignment, it will drift toward impulse. If income is no assignment, it will drift toward impulse. If income is not directed, it will be consumed by whatever speaks the loudest. Structure is not restrictive, it is liberating. It removes the burden of constant decision-making and replaces it with order. There is a spiritual dimension to responsibility that is often overlooked. Stewardship is not about control, it is about trustworthiness. What you manage reflects who you trust. If fear governs decisions, responsibility will feel heavy. If wisdom governs decisions, responsibility becomes manageable. Opportunity does not shout, it whispers. It appears in small invitations. An idea, a connection, a chance to reorganize, a moment to say no when saying yes would be easier. These moments are tests. They measure whether someone is prepared to handle more. Passing these tests rarely feels dramatic. Failing them often feels harmless. But the accumulation of either shapes destiny. January 16 is not about chasing opportunity. It is about becoming the kind of person opportunity looks for. Readiness cannot be faked. It is revealed in consistency, integrity, and order. When these are present, doors open naturally. When they are absent, Doors remain closed, not in punishment, but in protection. The truth is simple and demanding. Increase comes looking for managers, not dreamers. Dreams are important, but without responsibility they remain fragile. Responsibility gives dreams weight, and when responsibility is established, opportunity has a place to land. Delay is one of the most misinterpreted experiences in the life of faith and provision. It is often labeled as failure, rejection, or absence, when in reality it is frequently a test of readiness, perspective, and trust. Many assume that if something were meant to happen, it would happen quickly. Yet scripture, history, and lived experience all reveal a different pattern. What matters most is often what takes the longest to arrive. Delay exposes motivation. When results are postponed, the superficial reasons for pursuit fall away. What remains is the true reason. Are you seeking increase for relief, recognition, or responsibility? Each answer produces a different outcome. Delay refines intent, stripping away what cannot sustain the weight of fulfillment. There is also a preparatory function in delay. Certain outcomes require internal development before external manifestation. Character must be shaped before capacity is expanded. Wisdom must be established before influence is increased. Without this preparation, fulfillment becomes destructive rather than rewarding. Delay, then, is not denial. It is protection. January 16 stands at an intersection where impatience and foresight diverge. By this point in the year, some have already concluded that nothing has changed, but this assumption misunderstands how systems work. Early obedience rarely produces immediate visibility. Its first effect is internal order replaces chaos, clarity replaces confusion. These changes are easy to dismiss because they do not announce themselves, yet they are foundational. Delay tests consistency. Anyone can act wisely for a short period. Few can do so when there is no immediate reinforcement. This is where faith becomes operational. Faith is not optimism. It is persistence without evidence. It is continuing to align behavior with truth even when results are still forming. Time reveals whether belief is real or rhetorical. There is danger in misreading delay. If you interpret it as rejection, you may abandon the very path that was producing progress. Many turn back just before alignment matures into opportunity. The silence was not absence, it was incubation. Seeds grow in darkness before they ever break the surface. Pulling them up too early guarantees failure. Delay also recalibrates dependency. Immediate success can foster self-reliance. Delayed success fosters humility. When progress takes time, gratitude deepens, perspective broadens, entitlement dissolves. These qualities are not incidental. They are essential for sustaining increase once it arrives. Financially, delay often reveals weak systems. It highlights where discipline is inconsistent, where planning is incomplete, where patience is thin. This revelation is not condemnation. It is instruction. You are being shown what must be strengthened. Ignoring these signals turns delay into stagnation. Responding to them turns delay into momentum. January 16 offers clarity without crisis. It allows course correction while cost is still low. Waiting until later in the year often means adjusting under pressure. Early patience saves later pain. This is why delay, when interpreted correctly, becomes an ally rather than an enemy. There is also a promise embedded in delay. Nothing aligned is wasted. Every disciplined choice made in obscurity is being stored, compounded, prepared. Time is not idle, it is active. It is arranging connections, timing events, and synchronizing outcomes in ways unseen. What feels slow is often precise. The test of delay is simple but demanding. Will you continue to act wisely even if nothing changes yet? Those who do discover that one day, without warning, conditions shift. Doors open, resistance fades. What once required effort begins to flow. And when it does, you realize that delay was not keeping you from increase, it was preparing you to keep it.